Hi, Annalisa Six here with the Lady of Leisure and the Sober Curator to bring you the March 2023 horoscope for the sun and rising sign of Aquarius. Hi, Aquarius. Good to see you. Let's get right in it. March is going to be an interesting time because Saturn, which is one of your rulers, is finally leaving your sign of Aquarius. It's been there since 2020. And so, it's interesting. I mean, I think people that probably have Saturn in Aquarius probably enjoy Saturn and Aquarius energy more than sun rising or sun or rising or moon placements, just because Saturn on the sun or the rising or the moon is totally different than Saturn teaming back up with itself. But either way, it's still your ruling planet. It still shares characteristics with you. So I'm sure it's going to feel kind of weird having Saturn, move on to Pisces. But Saturn moves to Pisces on March 7th. We have a full moon that day, and then Saturn's going to be in Pisces until 2025. So if you're Aquarius rising, this will be a little bit more relevant for you than an Aquarius sun. But Pisces, the area of the chart that is for you is the area that rules your finances. And, Saturn in the money house is not easy. Saturn can bring some hard lessons when it comes to material stability and also self-worth. It can definitely have us questioning our self-worth. And, we usually have to work through old, outdated ideals of what worth is or what material stability is, because, I think that while material stability and self-worth are pretty straightforward concepts, what dictates our ideas around that is not necessarily straightforward. Like that can be unique to us in our own journey, right? So, some people's ideas of material stability are a certain level of wealth. So if you grew up maybe with a lot of money and a lot of, let's say, assets that you were around, like let's say if your family was very well off, your idea of material stability is probably very up here in terms of what needs need to get met. Oh my gosh, there's a little squirrel that's just right outside my door. She's so lucky my dogs are not anywhere near that door right now. They'd be going crazy. I'm lucky too, because they would be interrupting my video. Fingers crossed that we continue to have a smooth video. But like if you had certain ideas of wealth modeled to you at a young age, you might think that that's what being materially stable and successful is. And then your self-worth might be on all of these external things like, oh, well, if I don't have this type of car, I don't have this type of house, or if I don't have X amount of assets. Some people, they think that they're not materially stable unless they have thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars in savings, plus multiple assets, right? Plus life insurance policies, Roth IRA accounts, all of that kind of stuff. And then there's people that feel materially stable if they're just able to pay their bills on time, and they live in an apartment. They don't have any assets. Maybe they have a car, but that's it, and I don't even know if a car is really considered a real asset. But, like just having your material, bills paid, like your heat and your water and your rent, like that is enough, and some people live paycheck to paycheck, but if all those bills are getting paid, they're fine with that and they have no savings, but that's how they feel stable, right? I haven't had insurance in 10 years, health insurance, and I've had people in my life where they've lapsed in their insurance, or their insurance has gotten put on hold while they're going through a job transition, and they're freaking out because they don't have that insurance, and I'm sitting here like going on year whatever of not having insurance, being like, you're okay, like it's going to be okay. I haven't had health insurance in 10 years, like you'll last 2 months, but if they have prescriptions they need and it's a lot of money out of pocket, I totally get that, especially if you have health issues, right? I'm actually waiting on my application for health insurance to get approved right now. So I'm hoping that I won't be in that no health insurance camp for any much longer. But, my point in bringing that up is that this area of the chart where Saturn's entering is, the area that we also have the sun, and Mercury just entered as well. So Pisces, Mercury, Mercury entered Pisces yesterday on March 3rd. It's going to be there until the 19th. And so self-worth and material stability And our views on it, our perceptions on it are highlighted for the Aquarius individual. And it's important that you reflect on the fact that material stability and self-worth is subjective. It's up to you on what that means for you. It's not necessarily up to society, and it's not up to our families and what our families did or what other people are doing. I mean, I watch The Real Housewives because I enjoy drama that is not in my life. I don't have any drama in my life, but I like watching it on TV. Don't want it in my life. And I watched what some of these women have materially. I just watched Heather, I don't remember what her last name is, but she just showed up her mansion in this last season on the OC. And I was just like, oh my God, like I would love an over the top giant house. But watching her give a tour of this house was so overwhelming to me. And it just, I was like, there is no way that I feel like I could live in that and be comfortable. Like it felt like a museum or an art project, you know, and in a way where I was like, I don't want to touch anything, you know, and, you know, but I imagine like for her sense of accomplishment and her sense of self, having that accomplishment and material stability on that level, it makes her feel her self-worth, I'm sure, is really great. You know what I mean? And then you'll watch these other Real Housewives that had that, and then, you know, their husband ends up being a crook and they lose it all, and then they're having to rebuild. And it's interesting watching people go through that loss because their sense of self-worth changes. They start to realize that their worthiness, it was not dependent on the husband's lifestyle or that giant house. They start realizing that who they are outside of that is still valid. It's still worthy. And I think that's the real lesson of the second house, you know, the second house journey to self-worth and finding value in oneself is a deeper feeling, a deeper thing than what you momentarily have, you know, out here. Everything's temporary too. You know, we don't take this stuff with us when we die, like the houses, the cars, the money, the insurance, all that shit, you know, even debt, right? Like even we don't take our debt with us when we die, like that dissolves, you know, it's done. So even the debt that you have in your life that you might feel guilty or shame around, for one, my advice with anybody having shame around debt, Google, Elon Musk, Amazon, Apple, all those big companies, Tesla, Google their debt. It'll make you feel a million times better. The American dream is founded on debt. Our own country is in thousands of dollars of debt. Not saying that you shouldn't get yourself out of it or work to get yourself out of it or in a better financial position over this time, but it's really important that you cut yourself a break and also kind of reconcile maybe some of those issues of worthiness. Like you don't need to feel like just because you have student loans or debt, your worth is bad, you know, or, you know, having a mortgage is bad. I know I was raised in two very different ways. I grew up with a father that was very anti-financing and anti-debt, but he owned a house and paid a mortgage and had a roommate to help him with the bills. And then I grew up like with my mom who never had to do that. Like she didn't own a house up until recently and, you know, was living with my grandma. Like I grew up, you know, we lived with my grandma. And my mom was totally pro financing stuff. Not that she really ever did, because, you know, we couldn't really afford it. So she didn't start building credit until way later. So even though my dad was the one building credit, he was anti having a lot of debt. And even though my mom wasn't building credit, she was way more pro using debt to work in your favor. So it was like these two very different ways of living. I've also, you know, my grandparents were all professors and had like college backgrounds and were very much in the system of education. And so I had that modeled to me of like going this traditional college, you know, real job route, you know, salaried job route and having homes, you know, and doing the family thing, to having parents that were self-employed and kind of earning their own way and needing a lot of financial help from their families to fulfill their dreams around that stuff, you know. And my family is really successful as self-employed people, and my grandparents as professors were really successful. And so I've seen all these different ways modeled to me on how you can accomplish the same things but differently. And so, you know, we tend to have a lot of different views in society and from our parents on what the right way to do life is. And there's no right way to do life. And so if you're, you know, working through those issues, around self-worth during this Pisces season and Saturn in Pisces, those are things to think about because they're going to come up for you. And you might realize that more of these unconventional things that you gravitate towards as an Aquarius can also be a means to accomplishing stability and self-worth, right? And whatever that means to you, whether that's having assets, living paycheck to paycheck, or, you know, being a nomad and living out of your car or your van as you travel the world, or starting a family with somebody and staying in one place. Like there's, you know, all those different options. And I think the self-acceptance part is the big one. So let's talk about self-acceptance for the month of March, because Aries, which is the sign that rules the self, is popping off all over the place. So we've got 5 celestial bodies starting out in Aries in March. Venus, Jupiter, Vesta, Juno, and Chiron are all in Aries. And we had a Venus, Jupiter, Chiron conjunction on March 2nd that we're still kind of in the orb of influence with right now. And that's a great energy for working on issues around self-worth and confidence, especially for Aquarius, because where this is hitting in the Aquarius chart is the area that has to do with communication and perceptions around how we communicate and share our ideas. And Aquarius is different. Aquarius walks to the beat of their own drum. They're unique. They're said to be more of the weirdo of society because they're on the fringe of society. They're pushing, you know, for kind of this future focused world that doesn't exist yet. And so people think that's weird. They're like, that's different. I don't get that. And I think what can happen for people that are naturally more oddball compared to society or what's quote unquote normal is you have a lot of insecurities around expressing yourself or sharing yourself because you know that you're different, you know, and there's obviously that's not true for every Aquarius. I think a lot of Aquarius people are very confident in being their weirdo selves, you know, but this is a really powerful time with this, you know, stellium and Aries, especially with Venus, Jupiter, Chiron in the mix, to heal any trauma or anxieties or work on healing anything around communicating your truth in a more direct, assertive, confident way. Because Aries is confident and assertive and direct. Does that mean if you're in Aries, you feel that way? Not necessarily, because everybody's birth chart is different, but Aries, the archetype, rules those themes. And so the other thing about Aries being in the area of communication for the Aquarius chart that you have to be really mindful of is that as much as it's important for you to learn how to speak your truth, a lot of Aquariuses do. A lot of Aquariuses are very into forms of activism and advocacy. And so if you are one of those types of Aquarius people, you're getting this really good boost of energy to kind of lean into some of that activism and kind of want to uphold your truth. But what can also happen is kind of like militant activism, where instead of really turning people onto your idea, you just piss everybody off. And Aries has a really good, Aries is, well, I'm hearing some interesting sounds. Sorry. It sounded like Thumper outside, the bunny rabbit. I'm like, hopefully my wall's not doing something bad. So Aries, you know, being cardinal fire and ruled by Mars, has a really natural inclination to be reactive or dominating or like overly expressive in the wrong ways. Mars, you know, is that planet that kind of represents conflict and anger. You know, it's the fight, and there's positivity in that, especially in activism. Like we need that fight. But a lot of times what can happen if we approach problems in that heated or that active of a way is we just turn people off to it completely. You know, it's kind of like that lead by example sometimes is better than trying to like harp our ideas or talk our ideas into the ground with people that are not receptive to it. And so, you know, I'm vegan, and I've, you know, before I was vegan, it was really hip to go vegan in my teenage years in the little liberal pockets of my youth. So being a punk rock kid and being in like kind of these little different pockets of kids my age in different scenes, you know, there was scene kids, there was emo kids, there was indie rock kids, there was hipsters that were kind of, you know, already starting as kids. And there was like punk kids like me, rockabilly kids. And, you know, in the metal scene around my age group in Portland specifically, it was really, really hip if you were metal and you were in your teens, early 20s to be vegan. And of course, nobody acted like it was a phase, or, everybody was like, this is my hill to die on. This is my lifestyle. And I was around a lot of militant vegans in Seattle and Portland during the early 2000s. And I had been raised vegetarian, so I was really open-minded to that stuff. But at the time, I wasn't vegan or vegetarian. I just kind of did whatever I wanted. And I ended up, in a lot of situations around militant vegans that really turned me off to anything that they had to say, because they were just assholes about it. Like, why would I want to listen to somebody talk about compassion who is full of hate? Why would I do that? And so it just kind of made me not take their movement that seriously. And it wasn't until I started having a bunch of health problems that I started actually looking into veganism, because one of my other friends was doing it for her health and experiencing some benefits. And honestly, my interest in veganism was digestive related and weight loss related, not ethics. I did not really, think about the ethical side of it, because I kind of put the blinders on, right? And it wasn't until I stopped being vegan for a few years and went back to being vegan after the health stuff came back that I started going down the ethical path. But I was so turned off towards the ethical part of veganism because of militant vegans, and because of the, shock value of, let's just show everybody all these horrible things happening to animals because that'll make them care. It doesn't work that way. Unfortunately, people are not turned off by violence. We have so much violence in our video game culture, pop culture. People have been totally desensitized to the sight of that stuff for the most part, that I don't think showing people mutilated carcasses is enough, unfortunately, And so what makes people buy into what we're selling? Compassion and living by example. If people see it working and there's results, they'll be interested. And if you're nice and you're living a successful life with those ideals, people will show interest. But they're not going to show interest if you're, sharing a bunch of stuff on social media that's abrasive and mean and ugly and rageful. And my point in talking about this isn't to sit and preach veganism at all, to each their own, but to show that when we have Aries in an area like the third house, which is the house of communication, it can work in two different ways. When we need to fight and we need to advocate for the cause that we believe in, it can rev all of that up and give us that confidence to do that. And that's great, because sometimes we need that fight. Sometimes we need to tell everyone to go F themselves. We need to get in the streets and we need to advocate. But there can also be the other side, where if we get too aggro and too on our high horse and, rage, we can turn into the thing that we're trying to fight. And we can end up just turning people off to what we have to say in our movement in general. So for you, Aquarius, in Aries season, with all of these Aries planets starting out in Pisces season, that is highlighted as a theme for you to kind of have to work through that in a more mundane way, not related to the world out here. That could just be in your interpersonal dynamics with people you care about, your people that you live with, that you share your space with, or even just your interpersonal dynamics that you have, at work or whatever. There's definitely more of an emphasis on more of your personal life than out in the world, but that can kind of trickle, it's not fixed, it's a spectrum. So those are things to think about. So again, like, I want the Jupiter Venus energy to support you in finding the confidence to speak your truth, but I also want you to be mindful of that other side of it, right? And if you want to get in a fight on the internet, go ahead, be my guest. I don't like fighting on the internet, but that is very possible for you in March to get in some heated debates in person or on the internet. So moving away from that for a second, we're going to talk about Mars. So Mars, being the ruler of Aries, has been in Gemini since August, and Mars is finally making its last little bit through Gemini, and it's going to enter Cancer on the 25th of March, and it's going to stay in Cancer until May 21st. So we have Mars in Cancer for a good little chunk of time, about 2 months, which isn't abnormal for Mars when it's not doing any retrograde movements or anything. And the area that this is hitting for you is your health. And so Mars in Cancer, this is something that, like, you're going to be really needing to focus on your stomach health. And if you're a female, or if you are somebody with female organs, maybe you don't identify as female, but if you have a uterus, or you know, any kind of female parts, that health needs to be focused on in a positive way while Mars is passing through this house. When Mars is passing through the area of health, we can have some health problems that come up that need to be addressed. And Cancer rules a lot of the reproductive parts of the body. So even if you're, you know, a man or with male parts, those are things that you might be kind of needing to be mindful of and, you know, deal with in your stomach. Like any kind of digestion, stomach health is good for an Aquarius, you know, going through a Cancer transit to kind of, you know, your nervous system, because that all affects your hormonal health, right? So that's part of your reproductive health. What we put in our stomachs and the health of our gut affects our reproductive hormonal health. So that's something that's positive for you to be thinking about as Mars is moving through Cancer, and you have some time to kind of think about ways that you can rein in anything you're doing that's not constructive before it moves into Cancer on the 25th. We already talked about Saturn moving into Pisces. So that's kind of the first half of the month for the most part. We have a full moon in Virgo on March 7th, that same day that Saturn moves into Cancer. And so, you know, full moons are great times. It's a great time to release and let go of things that we don't want to bring with us into the astrological new year. It's also a great time to manifest things that we want. And the area that it's hitting for the Aquarius individual is the area that has to do with shared resources, any connection to inheritance, or a relationship to our sexuality. And so, you know, if there's things around your shared resources, so like investments, loans, relationships to money with anyone you're married to or partnered with, even people that you might share your money with in the family, if the family is loaning you money, things like that. This is a good time to kind of set intentions around how you want those areas of your life to go moving forward. So it's the full moon, you know, that's what we do. Sexual health too. Like if you're in a position where you're kind of wanting to work on your relationship to your sexuality, things like that, that can be positive for this full moon too. Once we get into the last half of the month, so kind of kicking off the last half of the month, Venus and Juno are going to be moving into Taurus. Venus moves into Taurus on the 17th. I think Juno is a couple days before that. I don't have the exact date for Juno in front of me. I'm always so lazy with the asteroids. I left that ephemeris in the other room, and it's like I have the dates, but I feel like nobody tracks the asteroids outside of astrologers, so I don't really get too into it. But yeah, so Venus will be in domicile and it's one of its home signs of Taurus, which is great. It's going to kind of anchor us, whereas the beginning of the month is a little crazy and chaotic, and moving forward, Venus will come in and kind of slow a little bit down and anchor us a little bit. And where that's hitting for you is in your home. So I can't help but think about, there's one Aquarius friend that I have that if you watch this, yes, I'm talking about you. I love you. And she started a home project during Mercury retrograde that is amazing, but Mercury retrograde in Capricorn, such a difficult time to start that. And the area that it was hitting in her personal birth chart was the area that represents home. And so I was just like, so of course, what happens when Mercury's retrograde and we're working on a home project? It takes longer. There's setbacks, delays. Maybe there's plans that we didn't foresee were going to need to be done. It's more expensive than what we thought. And all those things happened, of course. And of course, that's just normal house stuff. Like whether that happens during a Mercury retrograde or not, like that's just what renovating a home is. But it's almost guaranteed that there's going to be more of that stuff during Mercury retrograde, right? So one of the reason why I brought that up is because for Aquarius horoscope, Venus coming into Taurus, it's hitting the area that rules the home, and it's a blessing. It's like, here you go. Let's bring peace and joy and beauty into our home. It's a great time to connect with family. It's a great time to nourish our bodies. It's a great time to make our home aesthetically pleasing. So I actually have a phone date with this friend tomorrow. I'm really excited to hear about how her home renovation is going. And I'm really hoping that this Venus moving into Taurus is going to make that come together and get finished for her easily. Venus is going to be in Taurus through the first part of April before entering Gemini around the 10th. So yeah, I'm excited for her getting that home project done and having some blessings around it instead of the chaos that they've been living in. I have to renovate this room in my house that I'm sitting in, and I'm so nervous about it because, you know, we have a set budget for it, but nothing's ever stays that way. So I'm like, yes, I want to renovate this, but I'm scared to spend that much money. And then also like, maybe it'll be more expensive. I don't like the thought of that, and living in your house while it's getting renovated, having dogs that don't like people being in their space. It's a lot. So anyways, Venus and Taurus should be helpful for you, Aquarius, in that way. And then Mercury is going to be moving to Aries on the 19th. So again, that enhances that communication energy that I spent so much time going over in terms of kind of the check yourself before you wreck yourself communication. But again, it's great for learning how to, have confidence in speaking your truth, asserting yourself, moving forward on plans, things like that. And then the sun moves into Aries the next day. We have the spring equinox. So the sun will be also bringing vitality to that area of your life. And then the next day after the spring equinox, we have a new moon in Aquarius at 0 degrees conjunct Mercury. So this is a great time for you to set intentions around how you talk, how you communicate, and communicating in ways that are confident and clear. And, I think Aries gets a bad rap having Mars as its ruler, and some of the shadow qualities of being reactive and dominating, and maybe kind of, there's more anger behind things and can be kind of a loose cannon. But there's a part of Aries communication that I really love, which is there's a really fun, flippant sense of humor, an ability to really laugh at things and not take anything too seriously. I really like some of the more assertive, aggressive energy that Aries has, where they just know what they want. And sometimes for somebody like me that's mutable and kind of a little too go with the flow, it's so helpful to have an Aries around that's just like, nope, this is what I want, and this is what we're going to do, and let's do it, And so I think that the area, since this is hitting for Aquarius's communication, that can be kind of an intention to set on being more direct, more linear, maybe less. I think, Aquarius is so focused on the group and the community and making things work for everybody that you forget yourself. You forget sometimes to just be selfish. There's value in being selfish sometimes. When we're selfish and we fill our own cup, we have more to give. We have more to give and more to figure out in that way. And there's nothing wrong with saying, you know what, this is what I want. I don't want that. I'm sorry. And sometimes Aquarius can get a little too, wishy-washy or spacey or flighty, beating around the bush, trying to make everybody happy. And so those are things that, maybe are positive for you to set intentions towards for this new moon in Aries on the 21st is, how do I be direct? How do I go for what I want? And the Venus and Jupiter in Aries starting out in March is kind of helping you figuring out what you want. All right, Aquarius, that is your forecast for March. Good luck, and check yourself before you wreck yourself, because it sucks to put your foot in your mouth. I've done it a lot.